Hi guys, Bradley tuning in, and if you know me, you know I love me some real estate. And so when I'm looking at the federal election this year in 2019, my biggest question is how are the candidates going to handle the current issues facing our housing market today? And I think the single biggest issue is affordability. So today I want to share with you what some of the current issues are and what some of the plans that have been rolled out and maybe what we can expect to see and the things that are going to be most important for the candidates to stand on when the election happens. But before I get started, my name is Bradley Watson. I do videos like this all the time to keep you up to date on the latest tips and tricks here in the real estate market in the GTA. There is nothing more important for you to do as a Canadian citizen than vote. But I think if we're going to go to the polls, we need to know what every candidate is bringing to the table. And before we can know what needs to be fixed, we need to identify what are some of the current issues. And of course, affordability stands as probably the biggest. It really is the elephant in the room. In fact, it's just off camera that direction. And so I wanted to share briefly what some of our followers have said as far as housing goes in the issue of affordability. Thank you, Rosa, for your comment. What she writes is, I would love to own a home, build equity, pay it off, and then retire. And I believe that's the goal for every Canadian. What is most concerning to me are the houses being overpriced in Toronto. And she goes on to say that everyone deserves to be able to own a home, especially the middle class folks, but it is very hard. Comments like these recognize that how these candidates handle these issues could shape the federal election campaign in Canada. Now, before we get into some of the things we've seen the federal government do to assist in housing and what we can expect in the future, I just wanted to point out that from what I'm observing, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that the majority of issues of housing that have been addressed on the supply side have been in the form of rentals. And we've done videos on how the government is working on purpose-built rental suites and that type of thing. But when it comes to purchasing a property, they seem to be much better and far more involved in addressing demand and slowing that demand. And that's what we've seen here in the GTA. A study was done by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and what they found was only 3% of Canadian neighborhoods can in fact afford a 2-bedroom apartment on a full-time minimum wage. But does that really make sense? Because let's check some of the numbers that we've seen in Canada as of late. We've seen 421,000 new jobs in the last year, employment up 2.3%, and unemployment and poverty rates at historical lows. So this begs the question, if the economy is doing so well, then why are so many people struggling in the way of housing? Now, before I get into what has happened in the past and what we can think might happen as the election rolls around, let me ask you guys a question at this point in the video. How are you feeling the pinch of affordability here in the GTA or across Canada, wherever you're watching here across our great country? Are you feeling this pinch that's happening? And then my question to you is why? If everything seems to be going so well, why are we still facing this? And I'd love to have a discussion around that topic. Now let's jump into some of the major policy changes that have happened here in Canada under the Liberal government and question marks as to whether they will continue pending a power change at the national level. A significant investment that was made was a $55 billion investment over the next 10 years in something called the National Housing Strategy. And the idea here was to alleviate homelessness by half. In fact, they were planning on having 125,000 new units and 500,000 families were supposed to be given housing. Now this is currently underway. This has been going on for the last couple years, and as part of this strategy, there's also been other add-ons as well, but all of these things could change if the Liberals were ousted from the government. But maybe we do get lucky. Maybe the National Housing Plan sticks around and it continues because it's been going on its way for some time and there's been some progress made. But there's a couple other issues that have been brought up that were clearly political moves by the Liberal government that might not even happen or could be thrown off. And let me share those with you. The first one is the first-time buyer incentive. We've done videos on this. I will also tag that down below. There's so much content out there for you guys, and I hope you're getting value. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. But this whole thing was this idea of, instead of borrowing from your parents 5 or 10%, why don't you borrow from the government 5 or 10%, depending on what home you get and the cost of the home and your income and all of that stuff. What's most interesting to me is the timing this is going to be rolled out. They are planning to roll this out within a month of the actual election process. Now, how strategic is that? Let's spend a whole bunch of money, give people a bunch of loans over the next period of time, which is great, but let's strategically do it right before we could potentially lose power. Coincidence? I don't think so. Number 3 is something called the Canada Housing Benefit. Now this is expected to roll out in early 2020, again, shortly after the election, if it happens, and this is the question. But the idea here is to loan approximately $2,500 to low-income families for the purpose of assisting rent. It's supposed to help about 300,000 individuals across the country. So these are major items. Now, of course, there's a bunch of small ones too. As an example of some of these other small investments being made, just recently it was announced that $32 million will go to Habitat for Humanity over the next 3 years. And there's a bunch of these little items that kind of support housing, they support the affordability challenge because it is such a big issue. But the real question is will they continue? And this is where it comes back down to the campaigns that are running. If these items are important to you, we want to make sure that they stay and that that's part of the platform. But if you don't think they're working, maybe we throw them out. But I can't leave it there because there is another discussion that's happening at the table for the federal election, which I definitely have to highlight. Thank you, Kathy, for your comment. She writes, great blog. Thanks, Bradley. I hope they get rid of the stress test or help first-time buyers with the 30-year amount. And this is the other big challenge, the other big thing that's being questioned at the political level is this idea of when you qualify, the stress test that we've been experiencing over the last year or two, will that continue to happen? Will it continue to happen on renewals as another aspect as well, not just new mortgages, but renewals? And as well, will mortgage terms be allowed to be extended to 30 years? Now, with extending your mortgage term means your payments will go down, but it also means you take longer and you make more interest payments over the years, essentially. But allowing that opportunity for Canadians to help afford homes that might be out of reach. The mortgage stress test is single-handedly the biggest thing the Trudeau government did. So the fact that this is being questioned by other parties really makes you wonder if everything is going to just go back to how it was or what kind of changes we could expect under a different leadership. These are some of the big items that I can think of when it comes to affordability and some of the challenges facing the housing market here in Canada. But I would love to hear from you guys. As always, leave it down in the comments below, and I'd love to share that with everyone else as well. So if you haven't, and if you're not bold enough to leave a comment, I'm not going to be offended, but hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. Take care and keep it real.